Maya, I can't do this anymore. It's over between us. Please don't come inside.
The rain didn't just fall that night. It pressed down like a verdict. I stood on my mother's front porch with a suitcase in one hand and a paper bag of pie in the other, soaked through my jacket, staring at a door I'd opened 1,000 times. My phone buzzed. One voicemail. From Mom. I hit play. Maya, don't come home. Serena doesn't want any drama. Just go somewhere else, okay? We'll talk later. Her voice was calm, almost bored, like she was canceling a dentist appointment, like I wasn't her daughter standing outside in the cold with nowhere to go. For a second, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. The porch light above me flickered, and I caught my reflection in the glass. Wet hair plastered to my cheeks, mascara smudging, eyes too wide. I looked like someone who'd been running. Because I had. I'd taken off work, booked the cheapest flight I could find, and told myself this year would be different. Every year I did that. Every year I swallowed the old resentment and showed up with a smile, as if that smile could buy me a seat at the table. I could hear laughter inside. Plates, silverware, the warm hum of a house that was not mine. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I could have called. I could have knocked. I could have forced the issue. But I already knew how that would end. When I was 16, I'd planned my birthday for weeks. Nothing big, just dinner and a movie. Mom canceled it 2 hours before because Serena was having a rough day and needed comfort. They ate ice cream on the couch while I stayed in my room, listening to the TV through the wall and telling myself I wasn't jealous. I was being dramatic. At my high school graduation, Mom cried. Not when I walked across the stage. She cried when Serena's name was announced for most likely to succeed, like a paper certificate could predict the future. Mom posted photos that night. Serena in a dress, Serena in a cap, Serena laughing. I was in one picture, half a shoulder, cropped like an accident. When I tried to talk about it later, Mom's eyes went flat. Maya, you always do this. Why can't you just be happy for your sister? Why do you have to make everything about you? The words were familiar. They were her favorite tool. Drama. Sensitive. Too much. So by the time I stood on that porch, with rain dripping off my nose and my mother's voicemail echoing in my ear, I didn't feel shocked so much as confirmed. Like the last thread I'd been holding had finally snapped, and the sound was loud enough to hurt. I turned around. The street was empty, glossy with water. A car passed, spraying the curb. My wheels caught on a crack, and the sound, plastic scraping pavement, felt humiliating. I walked to the end of the block anyway, because staying would have meant begging. And I was done begging. I didn't have a plan. I just followed the glow of the city, the harbor lights reflecting on slick sidewalks. The air smelled like wet cedar and salt. My phone screen showed my bank balance, and my stomach tightened. I had enough for a cheap meal, maybe 2, and then nothing. My apartment was 3 states away. My flight home wasn't for 3 more days. The hotel I'd booked, non-refundable, was across town, and suddenly it felt like a punishment I'd paid for in advance. Somewhere along the waterfront, I saw a small diner tucked between a bait shop and a closed-up tourist kiosk. Warm light spilled through fogged windows. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't even cute. It was just open. Inside, the air hit my face like a blanket. Coffee, soup, bread, the kind of warmth that doesn't ask you to earn it. I slid into a booth in the corner, back against the wall, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu with a voice that didn't sound like mine. My hands shook when I wrapped them around the mug they set down. That's when I noticed the family at the center table. 3 generations maybe, an older couple with kind eyes, a younger man in a flannel shirt, a woman laughing with her head thrown back. They weren't loud, they weren't trying, they just looked safe. I tried not to stare. I tried to focus on the steam rising from my cup, on the clink of forks, on anything that wasn't the ache in my chest. But then the older woman looked over. Our eyes met. I dropped my gaze fast, heat rushing to my face. The last thing I wanted was pity. I'd had enough of that too. Too late. She stood up. I watched her walk toward me, steady and unhurried, like she'd done this before. She stopped beside my booth, not looming, not hovering, just present. "Hi," she said softly. "I don't mean to intrude." I nodded, throat tight. Her eyes flicked to my suitcase at my feet, then back to my face. No judgment, no curiosity that felt sharp. "Would you like to sit with us?" she asked. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to explain. Just, you shouldn't be alone tonight." The words hit me harder than my mother's voicemail, because for the first time in a long time, someone was offering me a seat without making me pay for it with silence. I opened my mouth to refuse on instinct, and then my gaze dropped to her wrist. A simple leather band, worn smooth with time, with a small silver clasp shaped like an anchor. My chest tightened. I'd seen that exact clasp before. On my father. My breath caught. "How do you have that?" I whispered, the question coming out like a broken thing. And the woman's expression changed, just slightly, like she'd been waiting for me to notice. "Because," she said, pulling her sleeve back a little more, "some things don't end where you think they do." Then she smiled, gentle but certain. "And you, sweetheart," she added, "look like you've been carrying the wrong kind of family for a long time." The woman didn't flinch when I asked about the anchor clasp. She didn't rush to answer either. She just held my gaze like she could see the whole messy story behind my wet hair and shaking hands, and she refused to make me feel small for it. "Come sit," she said again, softer this time. "Just for a bowl of soup, then you can decide." My pride tried to stand up first. My pride always did. It was the only thing that had kept me upright in rooms where I was treated like extra furniture. But my body betrayed me. My stomach growled. My throat burned. I nodded once, like a surrender, and slid out of the booth. When I reached for my suitcase, the younger man at the center table was already on his feet. Tall, broad shoulders, work-rough hands. He didn't grab my bag like I was helpless. He lifted it like it was nothing, then looked at me for permission. "May I?" he asked. I swallowed. "Yeah, thanks." "I'm Theo," he said, and his voice was calm in a way that made my heartbeat slow down, just a little. The older man pulled out a chair for me, not dramatically, not like a show, like it was normal to make space for someone. The woman, Nora, sat across from me. Her eyes were sharp but kind, the kind of sharp that cuts ropes, not people. "This is Ellis," she said, gesturing to her husband, "and that's my son, Theo. The woman who just went to the restroom is my daughter-in-law, Mina. She'll be back in a moment." "I'm Maya," I managed. No one reacted like my name came with a warning label. No one tilted their head like they were deciding what kind of trouble I might be. A waitress appeared with a bowl of soup I hadn't ordered yet, steam rising like a small miracle. Nora had done it with one quiet hand gesture while she kept her eyes on me, as if she already knew I'd refuse if she made it obvious. I stared at the bowl. My chest tightened. It wasn't the soup that got me. It was the assumption that I deserved warmth. "Eat," Ellis said, voice low and gentle. "Food first, words later if you want." I took the spoon. My fingers trembled. The first sip hit my tongue and my eyes stung immediately, like my body finally understood it didn't have to fight for every scrap of comfort. Theo didn't stare. Mina came back, smiled at me like I belonged, and slid into her seat without asking questions. Their conversation continued in soft currents around me. Normal things, small jokes, a story about a neighbor's dog stealing bread off a porch. They gave me a corner of their life without forcing me to bleed for it. Eventually, Nora spoke again. "So," she said, not prying, just opening a door. "Tonight was supposed to be family?" The spoon paused halfway to my mouth. I could have lied. I could have said I missed my flight. I could have made myself smaller to keep things smooth. That was what I'd been trained to do. But my anchor on her wrist sat there like a dare. "My mom told me not to come home," I said. The words sounded flat, like I was describing the weather. "She said my sister didn't want drama." Silence fell, but not the harsh kind, not the kind that punishes you for speaking. Mina's lips parted and her eyes softened. Theo's jaw tightened, just briefly. Ellis exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. Nora didn't gasp. She didn't clutch her pearls. She didn't offer fake outrage. She just nodded once, as if she'd met that kind of cruelty before and knew exactly what it cost. "People who fear drama," she said quietly, "often create it. They just want you to carry the noise for them." Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see. It was a private break, deep in my chest, like a lock finally giving way. "I'm not dramatic," I whispered, but it came out like a question, like I needed permission to believe it. Theo looked at me then, really looked. "No," he said, one word, solid. "You're hurt." That did it. My eyes blurred. I blinked hard, furious at myself. In my mother's house, tears were ammunition. Tears were proof that I was too much. Here, they just sat on my lashes like rain, and nobody weaponized them. Nora leaned back slightly, giving me space, and rolled her sleeve up another inch. The leather band showed more clearly, a small silver anchor clasp, worn smooth at the edges. "You recognize this," she said. "Yes," my voice shook. "My dad has one, or had one. He used to tap it when he was thinking. He told me it was from his bays on the docks, before he met my mom. He said it was just a thing." Ellis's throat bobbed. He looked like a man swallowing a memory that still tasted like metal. Nora held my gaze, steady as a lighthouse. "Because," she said, "before your mother ever decided who you were allowed to be, Paul worked for us. Not a day or two, years. He wasn't just a man on the docks, Maya." She leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped, carrying weight. "He was family to this table long before you ever walked into this diner." The air felt too thin. My hands went cold. Mina's eyes filled, and she covered her mouth like the truth had been waiting in her chest all along. Theo's jaw flexed again, controlled, protective, like he'd been holding something back out of respect for someone else's pain. I stared at Nora, and suddenly the anchor clasp wasn't a coincidence. It was a thread, and Nora was holding the other end. "I don't understand," I said. "Why are you telling me this?" Nora's gaze softened just a fraction. "Because you came in here soaked and shaking and still trying to stand tall," she said. "Because I've seen women disappear under the weight of people who call them too much." She paused, then spoke the next words like a promise. "And because, tonight, Maya, you weren't supposed to be alone. You just didn't know where your real doorway was." I looked down at my hands, at the spoon, at the steam curling up like a quiet prayer. My chest ached, but it was a different ache now, not just loss, possibility. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the bruises of years, a new thought formed, small but stubborn. Maybe being pushed out of one house was the only way I'd ever find the table that was meant for me. If I had stayed on my mother's porch that night, I would have turned into the version of myself they preferred. Quiet, grateful for scraps, easy to edit out of the frame. Instead, I ended up at Nora and Ellis Klein's table, and something in me started to thaw, not all at once, but in slow, stubborn layers. The next morning, Nora drove me back to the hotel I had paid for like a fool, then waited in the lobby while I checked in. She did not offer me money. She did not offer pity. She offered presence, which was somehow heavier and kinder than both. Theo carried my suitcase again, like it was normal to help someone without asking what they could do for you in return. In the elevator, he stared at the floor numbers lighting up and said, "You do not have to explain everything, but you also do not have to pretend it does not hurt." I hated how my throat tightened. I hated how close I was to crying again. "I am fine," I said, because those words were muscle memory. Theo glanced at me. His eyes were steady, not sharp. "No," he said, "simple. You are surviving." When the doors opened, Nora touched my elbow lightly, guiding me toward my room like she had done it 100 times for strangers who were not supposed to be strangers for long. Before she left, she handed me a small card with a number written in neat, compact ink. "If you decide you want a seat again," she said, "Sunday night, my house. Soup always. Questions never required." I stared at the card after they walked away. A dumb piece of paper, but my hands held it like proof that the night before had not been a dream. I told myself I would not go. Then Sunday came, and my hotel room felt like a box. The silence inside it pressed on my ribs until breathing took effort. I found myself in my rental car, driving toward their address with both hands locked on the wheel, as if the road might throw me off for daring to want something. Nora opened the door before I even knocked. No surprise, no performance, just warmth, steady and intentional. The house smelled like roasted garlic and clean wood. Ellis stood at the stove, stirring something that hissed softly. Theo was at the counter rolling dough with sleeves pushed up to his forearms. Mina was setting plates, humming like the sound came from a place that had never been punished for existing. I stopped in the doorway, uselessly clutching a bag of grocery store rolls. Theo nodded toward the bag. "Bribery," he said, deadpan. Mina laughed. "We accept." I should have felt awkward. I should have felt like an intruder. Instead, I felt something worse and better at the same time. I felt wanted. The first few Sundays, I barely spoke. I listened. I absorbed the rhythm of a family that did not weaponize silence or affection. Nora asked me about my work once, not as a test, but as curiosity. I told her I did audio engineering for podcasts and commercials, that I could make a voice sound like velvet or steel, depending on the mix, that I spent my days cleaning background noise and pulling meaning out of chaos. Ellis raised his eyebrows. "So you hear what most people miss." I shrugged, but it landed somewhere deep. I had always heard what people miss. I had just been taught not to trust my own ears. Theo asked me to come by his workshop one afternoon. He restored old boats and built custom pieces, the kind of work that left sawdust in the air like golden smoke. The place was all texture and honest labor. He showed me a cedar plank and ran his fingers along the grain like he was reading a story. "Wood remembers," he said. "You can sand it down, but it still knows what it has been through." I stood there, breathing in the scent of resin, and suddenly my chest hurt in a new way. That night, back at the hotel, I listened to my mother's voicemail again. Not the words, the tone, the tiny pause before she said Serena's name, the cold ease of it. I opened my laptop and ran the audio through my usual software, the same way I would for a client. The waveform looked like a confession. I zoomed in, staring at the ridges and dips like they were fingerprints. I could hear the room around her, a faint clink, a burst of laughter in the background. They were already eating. They were already warm, and I was outside. I should have deleted it. I should have moved on. But something in me, sharp and newly awake, saved the file in a folder labeled simply Evidence. A week later, My phone lit up with an email from a landlord back home. Application denied. Credit issue. I blinked at the screen, confused. I had never missed a payment. I had never carried debt I could not handle. I lived lean. I lived careful. Careful was my whole brand. I called the credit bureau. I listened as the representative recited details that made my skin go tight. A loan, a guarantee, my name connected to a business account I had never touched. My fingers went numb. For a few seconds, the room spun, and I had to sit on the edge of the bed to keep from falling. They had not only shut me out, they had reached back to pull me under. I drove to Nora's house on a Tuesday, unannounced, shaking so hard my keys rattled. Nora opened the door, took one look at my face, and stepped aside. No questions, no judgment, just a clear path into safety. I held out my phone like it was evidence in court. "My credit," I said. "Something is wrong." Nora read the email once, then looked at me with a calm that made my panic feel small in the best way. "Not wrong," she said. "Done. On purpose." Theo appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on a towel. His eyes narrowed. "Who?" I did not answer right away. Saying their names felt like inviting them in. Nora turned toward her desk in the corner, already moving, already assembling a plan like she had been waiting for the moment I finally stopped doubting myself. "We pull the reports," she said. "We trace the signatures. We request the original documents. We document every call, every date, every response." I stared at her, stunned. "You know how to do all that?" Nora gave me a look, the kind that strips illusion down to bone. "Sweetheart," she said, "I did not spend my life cleaning up other people's messes without learning how to make them face them." Mina came in quietly, set a mug of tea near my hand, and squeezed my shoulder. Ellis stood behind Nora, silent but solid, like a wall you could finally lean on. I felt small again, but not the way my mother made me small. This was the smallness of realizing help existed, that I was not crazy, that I was not imagining patterns, that my pain had a name. Theo crouched beside the chair, meeting my eyes. "You are not powerless," he said. "You have skills. You have proof. You have a mind that hears the truth even when people try to bury it." My breath hitched. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. I looked down at my hands, at the calluses from carrying my own life for so long. I thought of the folder on my laptop, evidence. I thought of the way sound cannot lie when you know how to listen. For the first time, I did not ask, what did I do wrong? I asked, what do I do next? Nora's voice cut through my thoughts, calm and lethal. "We do this clean," she said. "We do this right. And when they show up pretending to love you, we will already have the truth lined up like dominoes." That night, when I drove back to the hotel, my phone buzzed again. A new email. The subject line was short, like a slap. "I know where you are." My stomach dropped. I opened it. A photo loaded slowly, then sharpened into focus. It was me, stepping out of the studio downtown, headphones around my neck, laughing at something a colleague had said. The angle was too far away to be accidental. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. They were watching, and now they were coming. The email sat on my screen like a live wire. "I know where you are." No greeting, no love, just ownership. I stared up a photo until the edges of it felt sharp enough to cut. Me outside the studio, headphones around my neck, laughing, unaware. The angle was distant, predatory. Someone had stood across the street and decided my life was still theirs to monitor. My first instinct was the old one: shrink, hide, apologize for taking up space. Then I heard Nora's voice in my head, calm and surgical. We do this clean. We do this right. So I drove to her house again, hands steady on the wheel even while my stomach churned. I refused to give my fear the steering wheel. Theo opened the door before I knocked. He took one look at my face and stepped closer, blocking the doorway without touching me, like he was saying with his body what my family never had. You are safe here. Nora didn't gasp when I showed her the email. She didn't even sit down. She read it once, then lifted her eyes, and something in her expression cooled into focus. They escalated, she said. Theo's voice came out low. That means they are desperate. Ellis stood near the window watching the street like a man who had once worked storms for a living. Or reckless, he murmured. Reckless people break things they cannot fix. I swallowed. My mom never does reckless. She does calculated. Nora gave a small nod, like she had just been handed the missing piece. Calculated people do reckless when the mask starts slipping. She pulled a folder from a drawer and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts, notes, timelines, and copies of the credit documents we had requested. It looked like a case file. It looked like someone had taken my panic and turned it into order. I stared at the pages, my name, my old address, a signature that wasn't mine. I forged it, I whispered. They tried, but trying is not the same as succeeding. I glanced up, confused. Nora tapped the page with one firm finger. The handwriting is sloppy. The date does not match the account opening sequence. The bank employee who processed it is the kind of person who signs anything if the client smiles and calls them sweetheart. That is not evidence for them. That is evidence for us. Us. The word hit me hard. I was so used to being alone that even partnership felt like a miracle. My phone buzzed again. A call. Mom. I felt my body want to obey, want to answer like a trained animal. My thumb hovered. Theo's eyes flicked to the screen and I saw anger flash there, controlled but real. I didn't answer. The voicemail came seconds later. Maya, stop being dramatic, my mother said, and her voice was sweet enough to make strangers believe her. Embarrassing for the family. Embarrassing for the family. Not worried for me, not sorry, not even curious. Theo exhaled through his nose. She is more concerned about the story than the truth. Nora's gaze stayed on me. What do you want, Maya? Not what they trained you to want. I opened my mouth and almost said, I want peace. That was the safe answer, the approved answer, but peace had been their favorite leash. I want to be free, I said instead. My voice shook, but it did not break. Ellis's eyes softened like he understood the cost of those words. Theo's jaw tightened again, protective and proud at the same time. Nora leaned back and studied me like she was seeing my shape clearly for the first time. Then we removed their access. How? I asked, and my own question sounded small. Nora's smile was brief. Not warm, not cruel, just certain. Paper, law, boundaries that do not bend when people cry. I frowned. They are still my parents. Nora's eyes did not waver. Biology is not a contract, and since they keep using your identity like a tool, we're going to lock the toolbox. That night, a message came from an unfamiliar number, short, neat, like someone trying to sound civilized while holding a knife. This is your Aunt Renee. Call me. I stared at it for a long time. Aunt Renee was my father's sister, the relative my mother always called difficult, jealous, negative, the one we never visited, the one whose name was spoken like a warning. Thea watched my face change. Who is it? My aunt, I said quietly, the one they told me to avoid. Nora's voice turned even calmer, like she was already building the next step. Call her on speaker. Do not give her your location. My hands shook as I dialed. Renee answered on the first ring. Her voice was tight, urgent. Maya, I do not have much time. Your mother is telling people you are engaged to someone wealthy. She is saying she got you the job. She is saying you owe the family. And your sister is in trouble, real trouble. There is debt, there are contracts, there are people she cannot pay. My throat went dry. Why are you telling me this? There was a pause, then a softer edge to Renee's voice. Because I was there when your mother decided you would be the one who absorbs every consequence, and because she's planning to show up somewhere public and make you look like the villain. Nora's eyes met mine across the table. No surprise, only confirmation. Theo's hand curled into a fist, then relaxed, controlled, ready. Renee took a breath. Maya, listen, do not meet them alone. Do not sign anything. If they ask for a photo, a conversation, a chance to explain, it is a trap. The word trap echoed in my head like a bell. After I hung up, the house felt quieter, heavier. I looked at the folder, the timelines, the evidence, the voicemails filed saved on my laptop, the skills I had spent years building in silence. I had been treated like I was too sensitive, too loud, too inconvenient. But the truth was, I had always been dangerous to people who lived on lies. Nora reached across the table and placed a document in front of me. A simple packet, clean lines, legal language, a path. I am going to ask you something, not because you need rescuing, because you deserve protection. Theo's voice softened. Maya, you can say no. Ellis nodded once, but if you say yes, you will not carry this alone again. I looked down at the top page and read the words I never expected to see connected to my name. Petition for adult adoption. My breath caught, my chest tightened, grief and relief collided so hard I felt dizzy. You want to make it official, I whispered. Nora's eyes shined, but her voice stayed steady. I want you to have a family that cannot be argued with at the door of your life. I thought of my mother's porch, the rain, the voicemail, the way I had stood outside like a stranger. Then I thought of this table, soup, quiet, hands that didn't take, only offered. I picked up the pen, and for the first time, I signed something that felt like it belonged to me. Outside, the rain returned, tapping the windows like impatient fingers. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from my mother. This time, her voice was different, lower, colder. If you try to replace us, she said, I will play what I have, and everyone will finally hear the truth about you. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, because I knew what I did for a living. I knew how easy it was to cut sound into a weapon, and I knew exactly how powerful the original could be when you stop being afraid to press play. The morning of my wedding, the harbor looked like it was holding its breath. Fog clung to the water in soft layers, and the air smelled like salt and rain and old wood. The venue was a restored warehouse by the docks, all warm string lights and polished beams, the kind of place that made the world feel intimate, even with the room full of people. I stood in a small side room with Mina fastening the last button on my dress. My hands were steady, but my pulse beat hard, deep in my throat. Not because I was afraid to marry Theo, because I knew my mother would come. She had been circling for weeks. Emails, voicemails, messages that swung from syrupy to sharp in a single breath. She wanted a stage. She wanted control. And the most dangerous thing I had ever done was take both away. Nora adjusted my veil with careful fingers. Her eyes met mine in the mirror. Calm, present, unshakable. You ready? She asked. I inhaled slowly. I tasted nerves, but underneath it was something stronger. Certainty. I am, I said. Ellis knocked softly and stepped in, wearing a suit that looked unfamiliar on him, like a storm forced into a frame. He held out his arm and I looped mine through his without thinking. The gesture cracked something open in my chest. Not sadness, not exactly. Relief. When the music started, the room beyond the door shifted into a hush. I heard chairs scrape, the soft murmur of guests turning, the faint click of someone's phone being put away. Ellis leaned close. Eyes forward, he murmured. Whatever happens, you keep walking. I nodded once. The doors opened and light spilled across the aisle like a blessing. Theo stood at the front, with hands clasped, jaw tight, eyes locked on me like I was the only thing keeping him rooted to the earth. When he smiled, the tension in my body loosened just enough for me to breathe. Halfway down the aisle, I saw her. My mother stood near the back at first, a bright dress cutting through the neutral tones like a flare. Serena was beside her, one hand pressed dramatically to her stomach, face already arranged in practiced distress. My father hovered behind them, shoulders rounded, eyes darting like he was searching for an exit. They weren't invited. They came anyway. My mother caught my eye and lifted her chin, as if daring me to deny her in public. Serena's mouth trembled. Perfect timing, perfect performance. I kept walking. I reached Theo, and he took my hands. His thumbs brushed my knuckles, grounding me. "You okay?" he whispered. I looked up at him. I am not the one who should be nervous. His eyes darkened with something fierce and proud. Good. The ceremony began. Vows, breath, the sound of rain tapping the high windows, soft as a warning. I spoke my promises to Theo with a voice that didn't shake. I meant every word. When he spoke his, I felt the room soften, like everyone could sense this wasn't just a wedding. It was an ending and a beginning. Then the officiant smiled and turned slightly toward the guests. "Before we continue," she said, "we would like to recognize the parents of the bride." A small ripple ran through the crowd. I felt Theo's fingers tighten around mine. My mother straightened, already preparing to step forward and claim the moment like it belonged to her. The officiant lifted a card from the podium, clear and deliberate. "Please join us in thanking Ellis and Nora Klein." The room fell into a silence so sharp it rang. For a second, my mother did not move. Her face froze, as if someone had cut the strings holding her expression together. Then she burst forward. "What is this?" she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That is my daughter. I am her mother. This is sick." Serena let out a small cry, like she was being stabbed by the audacity. My father's eyes dropped to the floor. My mother's gaze swung to me, furious and pleading at the same time. "Maya, stop. Stop embarrassing us. Stop making everything into drama." There it was again, the word she used to shrink me, drama. The officiant looked uncertain. A few guests shifted in their seats. I felt the room wobble, the way a crowd wavers when they smell chaos. Nora stepped forward. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She simply moved into the light with a calm that made my mother's anger look childish. "This is not a misunderstanding," Nora said evenly. "This is a boundary." My mother jabbed a finger toward her. "You have no right." Nora's eyes did not flinch. "Actually," she said, "I do." She nodded toward the security guard near the wall, then toward the officiant. A small signal, quiet control. My mother's face twisted. "Maya," she hissed, lowering her voice like a threat. "I have something. I have recordings. I will play them. I will show everyone what you really are." My pulse jumped. Not fear, recognition, because I knew what she meant. The edited audio she had threatened me with. A weapon made out of chopped up sound and missing context. Theo leaned closer, voice low. "Now," he said. I stepped forward. The microphone was right there. The room was watching. My mother's breath was loud in her own chest, like she thought she had already won. I looked at her. Really looked. And I saw it. The panic under the rage. The desperation under the performance. the truth she couldn't keep hidden anymore. "I know you have an audio clip," I said into my microphone, my voice calm, clear. "I also know how audio works, because it is my job." A murmur rolled through the room. My mother's eyes widened just slightly, like the ground had shifted under her heels. I continued, steady. "You can cut a voice to make it sound like anything. You can take one sentence and turn it into a weapon." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you cannot fight the original." I reached into my bouquet, where a small recorder was tucked under the ribbon, hidden in plain sight. I clicked it once. Simple. Theo's hand stayed warm on my back. My mother's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The room filled with her own voice, unedited, unmistakable from that night on the porch. "Maya, don't come home. Serena doesn't want any drama. Go somewhere else." Then another clip, the one that had changed everything in the diner weeks ago. Her voice again, colder, careless. "If she comes back, it ruins everything. Let her disappear." A gasp moved through the guests like wind. Serena went pale. My father's shoulders caved in, as if the sound finally broke something in him that silence had been holding together. My mother shook her head, lips trembling. "That is taken out of context." I tilted my head slightly. "What context makes it acceptable to tell your daughter to disappear?" The words landed, heavy, final. My father took one step forward, then stopped. His eyes were wet. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years, and the guilt on his face was almost unbearable. "I did not stop her," he whispered, voice cracking. "I should have." The room was so quiet I could hear the rain. I swallowed. My chest ached, not because I wanted their love back, because I finally understood I was never the problem. Nora spoke again, soft but firm. "This day is not for arguments. They are not invited. They will leave." The security guard approached. My mother's eyes darted, searching for allies, for sympathy, for a way to turn herself into the victim. She found none, not anymore. Serena began to cry louder, but it sounded thin now, exposed. My mother's face hardened into something like hate. "You will regret this," she spat. I lifted my chin. "No," I said, quietly. "I already survived it." They were escorted out, no shouting, no dragging, just removal, clean and simple, like taking trash to the curb. When the doors closed behind them, the room exhaled as one. Theo stepped closer, forehead touching mine. "Still with me?" he murmured. I smiled through the sting in my eyes. "Always." The officiant cleared her throat gently, voice warm. "Shall we continue?" I looked toward Ellis and Nora. Ellis's eyes glistened. Nora's gaze held mine, proud and protective all at once. I took Theo's hands again. And in that moment, standing under soft lights, with the harbor breathing outside the windows, I felt something settle in my bones. I had lost a family that only loved me when I was quiet, and I had gained a life where my voice, my truth, and my place at the table could not be taken away. If this story hit a nerve for you, if you have ever been called dramatic for refusing to disappear, tell me in the comments. Like this video if you believe boundaries are a form of self-respect, and subscribe to Still Waters Payback for more stories where the truth finally gets the microphone.